Shabbat Shalom, everybody, and welcome to the Hebrew Woman Show. I'm your host, Renaissance Woman, aka Ren Judah, and look who's with us today, Zell.
Hello.
Hi, Zell. How are you today?
Pretty good. I'm really good. How are you?
I'm great. It's really good to have you with us this morning, and because I wanted to just have a conversation. As you can see, the video is titled "A Conversation on the Lessons of the Laws of Leadership," because I feel like I have just went back and just made a complete study of these laws of leadership, and it's just taken me down so many different rabbit holes. And then in real time, especially since I started practicing the idea of taking that, that Marcus Aurelius style of meditation after the day. When things happen, I try to look and see what happened and what could have went better. And so that's where we are today. So we'll just open up with our slides that we always open up with. You guys, the purpose of this channel is for women to come together and be able to seek wise counsel and to speak with one another to help us overcome whatever we're dealing with in life, or maybe just to fellowship. So we're here to explore our biblical principles. And we are here to train ourselves to think biblically, not emotionally. That does not mean you don't have emotions or we don't expect you to have emotions. It is just that we have to, at some point, when we review and analyze the issues that we're facing, we need to look at them from a biblical mindset. Okay. We're here to examine ourselves. 2 Corinthians 13:5 says, examine yourselves whether ye be in the faith. Prove your own selves. Know you not your own selves how Christ is in you, except you be reprobates. And Lord knows, I don't want to be a reprobate, and I don't want to be around any reprobates. And Zell needs to stop being a reprobate. So, no, seriously, but this is the whole idea of taking that evening reflection, that Marcus Aurelius type of meditations, where at the end of your day you go in there and you examine yourself, because there are always lessons that can be learned. I look at it, and this week alone I had a series of unfortunate events that caused me to have to examine myself and what could have went better. I look at what happened, where did I possibly go wrong, and if I didn't go wrong, however I analyze it, what could have been better. To me, I'm always making mistakes, so I always go back and I try to look and see what I could do better. Here we strive to be women of Titus. Titus 2:1 says, but speak thou things which become sound doctrine, that the aged men be sober, grave, temperate, sound in faith, in charity, in patience, and that the aged women likewise, that they be in behavior that becometh holiness, not false accusers, not given to too much wine, teachers of good things. And we strive to be teachers of good things here. And for me, like, that first part always sticks about being a false accuser. Don't be a liar. Let your word be your bond and tell the truth. Don't be out here being drunk and intoxicated. You want to exemplify behavior that becometh holiness, that they may teach the young women to be grave and sober, to love their husbands, to love their children, to be discreet, chaste, keepers at home, good, obedient to their husbands, that the word of God not be blasphemed. That part is important, because what it is saying is that there is, in the Bible, there is in heaven, there is an order. And on earth, there's an order. There's a chain of command. And I did add in an extra word there to the young women. I put in grave. But it still applies, because at the top it says that we are to be grave. Those attributes that it laid out for men, that includes us. So whenever I hear people saying, well, what about the men? They are supposed to engage in these behaviors that becometh holiness as well. Okay. And so this is when we were talking about this earlier, Zell. When we're talking about, and I feel like we're here in this time, like I guess every generation is there, where people don't want to endure sound doctrine. And you want to, basically, let me just read it. For the time will come when they will not endure sound doctrine, but after their own lusts shall they heap upon themselves teachers having itching ears. Meaning, there people today will no longer have a desire for the word of God. You'll see people in church all day long and they do not crack their Bible. Their Bibles look brand new, because it's not convenient. See, when you try and attempt to follow this script, it requires you to maintain a level of ethics that just are not common today. The average workplace doesn't even adhere to their own ethics, their own code of ethics and standards. What do you think, Zell?
I 100% agree. Because at the end of the day, if they did, then we would see our society in a completely different light. A lot of the have wouldn't happen. And things would be completely, this would be a different society altogether. So they're just not doing that. It's not happening all along.
Yeah, yeah. I feel like there's a breaking away of just basic good ethics and civility, to the point where people engage in some of the most egregious behavior. And when you cry aloud and spare not, and you mention it, there's just this outrage and even the excuse. Because when we look at the Bryant situation, Jamal Bryant and his wife, for her to say that there's no standard for that, to tell you how to be a woman, a wife, a sister, and all these things. And I was like, there absolutely is a book for that. It's the Bible. And for you to be a head of a church, the first lady of church, you would think that something like that would never come out of your mouth, but it's because they have heaped upon
Mm,
themselves. They are teachers of their own doctrine, you know.
absolutely right. I mean, it's actually, if what's scary is if this is the leadership, this is supposed to be the better of us. This is what the leadership is. What does this mean for everybody?
Exactly. So if you just make it up as you go along, even with, and from everything to the apparel, just down to the behavior, because I mean, even the videos are very vain. Everything is, about showing your body and all that. And it's just like, as women of God, there is more to you than this vessel that you are showing up in. What does the inner cup look like? So I also wanted to talk about Second Timothy, and at the part here after it got, if we talked about the behaviors of the people, we see this today as well. But what really honed in for me this week, and I had to think about, was just how, let me just read it. So this know also that the last days perilous times shall come. For men shall be lovers of their own selves, covetous, boasters, proud, blasphemers, disobedient to parents, unthankful, and unholy. Well, we see that on social media all day long. People showing what they have, wanting to make it look like they have money when they're not, when they don't, or even if they do, just that boasting and that, and blasphemers. And I've been in so many clubhouse rooms and even on some of these YouTube channels where people are talking about God in a way that, it just wasn't common practice. And just to be openly blasphemous against the Most High is just something that you just really run across that's really common. If you get on the stage, a lot of times you'll get ran off if you start talking about the Bible. They're like, get out of here. So it's just and unthankful. And I've never seen such a group of people that are just so just entitled, without natural affection, truce breakers, false accusers, incontinent, fierce, despisers of those that are good, traitors, heady, high minded, lovers of pleasures more than lovers of God, having a form of godliness, but denying the power thereof. From such turn away. Now, how many people we know go to church? Some people every day, some
Mm,
people, every time the church door is open, so here you come. Some people go to mass every day, and they all these traits for them, right? Traitors, high-minded, heady, incontinent, false accusers. I mean, just the way these people lie today, it astonishes me. I'm just like, how are you comfortable lying like that? And the truce breakers, in some texts you'll see it's the oath breakers. Basically, you don't keep your word. You're a liar. And I think all these traits, these things matter. These are your character. This is talking about your character. So when you apply these things to the people today in the workspace, in the home space, and wherever you go, and you see these behaviors, it really makes you think about the times that we're in, Zell.
I totally. Because when you were talking about that, just thinking about the people that I know that they are, they are avid about going to church, and but then they are the first ones that'll go off the deep end and do certain things they don't have any business. It's like, just happened? And I mean, they are constantly in church. I mean, I've known people, when you said go to church every day, I know someone 7 days a week, they are doing something at their church. And I'm just like, well, how do you have a life outside of that? And the way they set up, they don't. They're not
Mhm.
going to have friends or family or anything that's not associated with that church.
And I think that a lot of times too, some of the behaviors you see, it comes from people belonging to cliques and things. Like you see some of these groups online, they join in these cult type of organizations, and they become what verse 6 says here. They are the sort that creep into the houses and lead captive silly women laden with sins, led away by diverse lusts. So when you look at a lot of these churches today, they are leading a lot of silly women astray with false doctrines. You don't need to read your Bible. You just need to under what did pastors say. You understand what I'm saying? Like you say, how you can go to church every day and have a form of godliness, but denying the power thereof. You don't believe in God, but you are running your behind to church every doggone day. It's amazing. Zell, you fell off. Are you there? Let's
Oh,
give
I'm
Zell.
here. I'm right
Oh,
here. I was trying to. I heard the little
okay.
ding, and so I wasn't sure if somebody had sent
Now
a.
it dropped you off, and then I put you back on.
Oh,
What happened? But so we go to our next
oh,
scripture here. Proverbs 11:14 says, "Where no counsel is, the people fall, but in a multitude of counselors there is safety." That's why we're here, so that we can be part of your multitude of counselors. And I have to say that I appreciate having Zell as part of my personal board of counsel. So Proverbs 19:20 says, "Hear counsel and receive instruction, that thou may be wise in thy latter end." There's no fool like an old fool. And I'm definitely getting up there, and I don't want to be an old fool. So Proverbs 28:26, "He that trusteth in his own heart is a fool, but whoso walketh wisely shall be delivered." So when you seek the safety of wise counsel and you're able to learn from your experiences, you will walk and be wise. And that doesn't mean we're telling you to believe any and everybody, and not even us. Try the spirit. Because 1 John 4:1 says, "Beloved, believe not every spirit, but try the spirits whether they are of God. Because many false prophets are gone out into the world." There are a lot of people out here, there are a lot of organizations out here that are telling you they are the truth. They have the truth, and all you got to do is listen to them and they'll set you free, right? So we want to make sure we try the spirit, because Christ told us that you will know them by the fruit that they bear. So all you got to do is take your time, slow down, and watch. And eventually, people are going to show you who they are. And as Maya said, when people show you who they are, believe them, and believe them the first time. That's the reason why probationary periods exist on jobs, right? They want to try the
mm-hmm.
spirit. They want to see how you're gonna act, how you're gonna conduct yourself while you're on probation. And you can learn a lot about people during these test periods, right? Proverbs 27:17 says, "Iron sharpeneth iron, so a man sharpeneth the countenance of his friend." We are here to sharpen each other and make each other wise and help each other to grow. That is person that is the purpose. You want that friction. You want that pushback. As a matter of fact, let me tell you, I train my AI to push back. I don't have my AI even set to where it just agrees with whatever I input. Like, you got a problem with this data? Is there an issue here? And I always ask for, when I'm processing documents or any type of data, confirm, verify, source. You should do that. We should prove ourselves, right? Know ye not your own selves? You prove yourself.
Mm.
Proverbs 29:18 says, "Where there is no vision, the people perish. But he that keepeth the law is happy." And I'm going to lean there because, first of all, I wholeheartedly believe that keeping the law will keep you happy. Now, does that mean you're not going to go through trials? Absolutely not. Christ, though, it's in the Bible, it tells you that you are going to go through trials, because the servant is not going to be treated better than the master. And so we saw what happened to Christ. So
Mm.
we're not supposed to think we're going to get out here and it's going to be a cakewalk, Zell. You know, I tell you. I like for me this week. You can stay off. You can stay off.
Oh, I was just trying to. It's funny because I was well. All I can think about is people that have prosperity ministries, and they're talking like every as long as you do the right thing, everything should go wonderful in your life, and you should have all this prosperity and the money and all the materialistic stuff should just flow. And I'm
hmm
thinking it's the opposite of that. When you start doing the right thing for the right reasons, you're going to be a target. It's not
hmm
going to just be easy for you. Will you be taken care of? Yes, but you're going to be a target. The world is not going to love you. They're not going to say, yeah, there goes a child of God. They're not going to do that.
If she
Let's
keeps
just
the
let her get to
law,
the front of the line. No.
she keeps the law. She follows the rules. Get her.
Exactly. Who does she think she is?
And it's challenging enough to keep the rules and to do the right thing. Just basic. I think in the basic course of your day, um, doing, in work, when you're dealing with your family, just trying to do the right thing. It's not the easy thing, but I do. That's why it says that the path is narrow, because it's a difficult road to travel. You especially try to fit my big behind through that little narrow gate, But seriously, it is difficult
Mm-hmm.
because it's rocky. There's a lot of inclines. There's a lot of
Mm-hmm.
downclines, and it's not easy.
And it's
But
lonely. It can be
it
real lonely.
is. It is a lonely road. But count it all joy, and we walk in it. If you walk it alone, you came in alone, you're gonna go out alone. Well, some of you might have came in with a twin, but you get the point. My whole purpose is that is I wanted to talk about these laws, and these 21 irrefutable laws of leadership, and we had just covered the law of the lid, and then we did the law of, and for me, the David and Saul story just keeps ringing all week, and I'm just like in my own situation, just thinking about literally having people trying to kill me professionally, but the idea of, and I was like, well, and I was like, has anybody asked Maxwell, how do these laws apply when you're in a toxic work environment? And so we got to
Mm.
tussling with that. And I had some interesting conversations. I just had an interesting conversation with my husband about it. And he helped me realize that a lot of times, like that bottleneck where I get stuck, it
Mm-hmm.
really comes from because, and I didn't realize this, it's because my feelings had become involved. And I was like,
Yeah.
well, I didn't think so though. I was just like, no, because I feel calm, I feel peaceful about it, but it's like, there is still a little bit of ego in there, because it's like I do believe, I like
Mm.
that whole extreme accountability thing. I do
Yeah.
think in terms of leadership, you do take full accountability of what is going on. But people need to be like, when we talk about extreme accountability, that does not reprieve the other people from their accountability. You still will get a action, just like with David. The Most High forgave David, but David still
Mm-hmm.
got punished.
Yep.
You don't get a reprieve. You don't get to just go off and skip into the sunset because you said you were sorry. He repented, and to repent means you turn away from the sin. You acknowledge it. A lot of
Mm-hmm.
people think that if they just repent, you can just keep going back like a dog to his vomit. You keep going back and doing these same things over and over again. No, that's not how it works. You have not repented. Repentance is that you turn away from the behavior. So even though he repented and he turned away, he still received judgment. And I always keep that in mind and think about, how am I moving out here and what am I doing? Because I do know that I'm going to be held accountable for the things that I say and do. These things are going to circle back around. And I can tell you a powerful lesson for me I learned just this week is that, when it comes to the rules, it's just like with the law. And it made me think about Saul. When the Most High told him to go and destroy the Amalekites, right? And to utterly destroy them, and he allowed the people to plunder, and they carried off some of the goods. Saul told Samuel he did it because he feared the people. it's that is the same issue that vexes people in leadership today. They fear the people. They fear being disliked. Saul wanted to be liked more than he wanted to do the will of the Most High. And then his excuse was, well, we were going to bring it down here and sacrifice it. And Samuel told him, obedience is better than sacrifice. You know, you got you to people think because they go and they put on sackcloth and ashes and you, oh, woe is me, I feel bad, I'm an offer, like, no, that doesn't change the smoke you about to get for your behavior. So it just, for me, I was thinking about,
Mhm.
I was just thinking about, Zell, you can stay off mute, you don't have
Oh,
to
I
keep
just got
muting,
you trying, but I
take
mean, I
your
was
time
thinking
to
about
come
what
off.
you were. I was thinking about what you were saying, and I can think was I have said that so many times. Obedience is better than sacrifice, and I don't think people realize what that really means. The goal is not to punish you.
Mm-hmm.
That's not the goal. No, you don't want to be punished. God does not want to punish us. The goal is for us to learn the lesson. It's for us to learn the lesson and apply it and live it in our life. That's the whole point. We don't spank our kids. We don't punish our kids for the sake of punishment. We do it for the correction, so the correction can be made. And I don't think people realize that it's not just because somebody's angry and I want to get you back. No, I want you to be better and do the right thing.
So you think even with David, with the repentance, the punishment still came to drive the lesson home.
Well, we got to also remember that there's a consequence for everything too. So
Mhm.
even though you repent, that does not mean I did something I shouldn't have done, but you're gonna reap what you sow. So we got to remember that. You have a child out of wedlock. That does not necessarily mean that the child goes away because
Right.
it's because you said I'm sorry. So there's gonna be a consequence to everything that we do, no matter what. But yeah, there was and then I was going to ask, so which punishment are we talking about? Because remember when he killed Bathsheba's husband, I don't think a lot of people realize he was punished for that.
Yeah,
You
well,
remember
that's
what
the
the
whole
punishment
thing I
was?
always think of is when the most of the curse that came upon him for
Yeah,
killing Uriah, that
yeah,
his son that was going to lay with his daughters, and his son, and ultimately his son Absalom ended up dying. You
yeah. The
know.
first son, the
Mm-hmm.
firstborn. I think a lot of times that people don't realize that the first baby was died, and so they don't realize that the first child was actually died
Yeah,
as a baby. But yeah, so and that's
yeah.
actually kind of messed up, but it is what it is.
He lost a lot,
He
but
did lose a
that's
lot.
why I always tell people, like, these 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 fruits, they're gonna come to bear. Like, you are sowing seeds. I see a lot of people who engage in all manner of wickedness, and then when things befall them in their lives, like they tragically lose a child, they lose their house, or anything that happens to them, they never put it together that there is a spiritual reckoning for your behavior.
Mhm.
You are going to sow.
Yeah.
And the Bible says that you're gonna get it back sevenfold. So whatever you did, you may think, well, no, that couldn't have come from that. That was nothing. Yeah, no, it wasn't nothing. And your harvest is seven times.
Hmm.
You know, when you take away something from somebody, you destroy somebody else professionally. You try to destroy somebody else personally. You're plotting on people's relationships. Whatever you're out here doing, you know what you're doing. You're gonna reap a harvest for that.
Yep.
Sowing seeds of discord, you're gonna you're gonna reap a harvest from that. These things don't just go. That energy you are expending, it's going out, and it's gonna circle right back. It is just literally like its own little law of conservation.
Exactly. Don't think we stop and really think about. Yeah. Yeah. 100% right.
And so I was thinking about these laws, and I was like, how do the 21 irrefutable laws of leadership because I do the Working Class Chronicles, and I talk a lot about hostile work environments. And I was thinking, I was
Hmm.
like, okay, so I'm talking about hostile work environments a lot during the week, and then I come back around on the Sabbath, and we're talking about the 21 irrefutable laws of leadership. What does the 21 laws of leadership look like in a hostile work environment? So
Ooh,
that's a tough one, huh?
it
So,
is. It does make me think about it.
so you think here about the law of the lid, right? Your leadership ceiling determines your impact. So if you're in a toxic work environment, your impact, I think, looks different. And it depends on if you are the one engaged in the hostility. So maybe you like your impact. But what about the people on the receiving end of what you're sowing? So what does the law of lid
Mm,
look like for you? Like, let's say that you are a person who is navigating the hostile work environment and you aren't one of the actors engaged in
mm.
the toxicity. What can you raise your lid in a toxic work environment, Zell?
I think that you can. I think you have to be very strategic though, because you got to really make sure. Because then it's almost like you're. This is my opinion. I think you're gonna be to a certain degree walking on eggshells when with all of this when you start talking, because you got to know exactly who the players are, what type of authority they have, and find a way to kind of work around all of. And I think that if anything else, being in a hostile work environment makes all of this stuff much, much more important. You cannot be lax. You don't have room to be to kind of let things slide and all of that. It's almost like to me, I think you have to be extremely, extremely strict when it comes to a lot of stuff. I believe you can grow. I just think you have to be very, very strategic with it.
And I agree with everything you just said, literally. And it's funny you said that about being strict, because I was just thinking about how, you want to be flexible. You want to let people
Yeah.
breathe. You want to let them do things. And like, oh, can I just do this? Can I just leave early? And then it's like,
Mm-mm.
what I've come to find out is that a lot of times ends up leading, because especially if you're in a toxic work environment, it's already broken. And so what a lot of times come to experience is that allowing making being flexible in an environment where people are already entitled or feel entitled, it creates a situation to where there's an expectation for you to say
Yeah.
yes. See,
Yep.
your capitulation leads to an expectation that leads to your desecration. Your temple is about to be desecrated, because now they feel like when you finally tell them no, because appeasement doesn't work. Saul learned the hard way. That's why he lost the kingdom. Trying to make your employees like you, letting them, yeah, go ahead and leave earlier. Yeah, you can do this. Well, you're bending the rules from them. And now it's like when they come, they don't come asking you, can they leave early? They come with their coat and their bag and, hey, I need to go. Now you have created a
Mm.
monster.
Yep. And the issue with that is once you start down a particular path and you're in a toxic work environment, it's really, really hard to turn it around. It's
I
really hard to change once you've hit in a particular direction.
and you know what, Zell? I thought that too originally, but as I think about it more, and even as we
Hmm.
talk, it's only hard because you still have the need to be liked. And what I've come to
Well,
find, especially if you're in a leadership position, you're gonna have to let that die, because you're gonna have to just say no once you realize.
oh yeah.
And a lot of times, what it takes is because how do you get back over that Rubicon? Once they disrespected you because you've said no, and you understand that you've created a monster, you can't just keep going, or they're
Oh
going to
no,
eat
you
you.
can't. And I'm not saying that you do keep going, but what ends up happening, like let's say for instance, like I have a situation with when it's not my situation, but I inherited it, where my previous boss, one of my previous bosses, had gotten into a bit of allowing one of my coworkers to work from home just whenever he needed to.
Mm-hmm.
Right. Well, we changed from a work from home company to a office company. So you're supposed to come and work in the office, but this particular person was being given that leeway. Well, now that we're no longer working from home, he feels like he should still be able to work from home whenever he wants to. And so it's like, well, how do we if how do we go from look, we're not doing that anymore? And he feels like, well, I'll be able to do it because this was the deal I had. I'm like, well, that person is not even here on the planet with us anymore. So, so this is the rule. And so now it's like, okay, somebody started something. And then after and that was the rule he had, not my and with my current boss. And so my current boss was like, well, hey, that's what my dad started with him. So I'm not gonna go against that. But he's not his manager anymore. So now I'm dealing with something that, two other people already started. And
Mm-hmm.
so now I'm like, okay, I need him in the office, but he's already had this set up where he can work. And so I had to really have a talk with him about working from the office and only not just anytime you want to, and not because you just don't want to drive into work. Regular
You're
basis.
breaking
We
up.
hello.
There you go.
But yeah, I had to start I have a real talk with him about working in the office and not working and that working from home is on a it's on a very very specific reasons, and it needs to be approved. So just randomly whenever he feels like it, no, you don't just randomly decide to stay in, which is what he had started. But
And
yeah, I mean,
so,
you
but
can
you
make
made that switch, right?
did, but what I'm saying is sometimes it can be, and what I say is it can be easy for me, but then they can make it difficult if they want to say, well, no, and because I've seen people be argumentative about that.
Yeah.
And
Well,
so once if they want to make it difficult, they can make it difficult or try to, even when you establish the rule.
so here's my thing about when they make it difficult. That's the conundrum, right? Like, so where do
Hmm.
you? It's like, okay, so these are the terms, and you know that there's a possibility for them to change. And even if it's something that you feel like your employer is just arbitrarily doing, I think you have to get to a point where you decide where. I think you have to decide where your line is, and I think they have to decide where their line is as well. I think that's a two-way street, because I don't think that just a hammer, this is the way it's going to be. I don't think that's really practical. But again, if we're talking about a toxic environment, you're really not going to have a middle ground. Like, so your environment isn't completely toxic. So you
No,
just have
it's
regular
not.
you have regular work dynamics. So I feel like the laws can apply for you. And listen, and I don't care how nice you are or how great the place you work, there's always going to be somebody that hates you.
Oh
There's
yeah.
some people that just don't like you. And that's why for me, the lesson of appeasement doesn't work really rung home, because like me being an appeaser, trying to people please, allowing employees to do things that were outside of the scope, allowing that flexibility, resulted in me getting yelled at. And I think that
Hmm.
people feel like they can disrespect you and talk to you crazy because, hey, you don't tell me what to do. But in a toxic work environment, that's baked in. The disrespect comes from anywhere at any given time because it's a toxic work environment. So when you're in that, you can't really give people the flexibility you want, because the flexibility gets weaponized. And I feel like a lot of times it's even a damned if you do and damned if you don't situation. That's like, follow the policy, and then if the management is toxic, they will weaponize that against you. You're too strict.
Yep.
So it's like you just can't win. Well, either I enforce the policy or I don't. Then when I don't enforce it, who told you you could tell them to do that? You failure to failure to supervise. It's like you really, it is really a really weird and hard needle to thread. And so that's what got me thinking about the law of the lid. And so I can say that in a toxic work environment, you absolutely can raise your lid level because number one, like for me, I started seeking outside ways to grow, personal development. Joining leadership programs, reading these books, teaching the classes. They are all practice for me, right? And I think that when it comes to your lid, you can raise your lid in learning how to overcome adversity. Because a lot of these situations, they're temporary because something is always changing, especially in the field that I'm in. Something is always changing. And if nothing else, it can possibly change every, election. Um, and so that's what happened to the earlier part. There was election and now something new. And then, it would be something new and you could get it's always ever changing. But in places where it's just set, I think you do have to make a decision on if you're going to stay or if you're going to go. And even in this situation, it's the same, where how far can you grow? And so now we talk about the
Hmm.
law of influence. If you're in an environment and you're the person that's targeted, what does influence look like? As a employee, I think it looks like, and even with the lid, you just show up and you do your job like you do it unto the Lord. You follow the rules, you learn the rules, and you just do your job and you do it to the best of your ability. Because a lot of times I believe that if you're busy and you're minding your own business, you can stay out of the toxicity. Now,
Right.
if you're in the leadership part of it, you can't avoid because your job is to supervise. And so a lot
Yeah.
of times, if you are supervising a toxic group, you're going to have to engage. You don't have the luxury of just staying in your office. You're going to have to follow up because you have to check the work. And if the work is incorrect, you'll have to go and inform the employees that they need to take corrective action. Well, if they've been in an
Now,
environment where they do what they want to do, you're going to have a problem.
yeah. And see the thing, like when I took correct, or when I started making changes, typically um, I would end up basically
In and
talking to
out.
my
Like you got these gaps. Like you're talking clear, and then there'll be a break. So I don't know if your Wi-Fi is trying to come try to compete with your phone service. Maybe if you have your Wi-Fi on.
if you have your Wi-Fi on.
Hmm?
Hello? I was trying to see if that was better.
You sound different, so we can try it. Let's see.
Okay. Well, I was gonna say that for me, when I started making changes, one of my first stops was to my boss to say, "Hey, this is the direction I'm taking the group in. I want to make sure that you're okay with this. I'm going to do this and this." And we would literally discuss. I would discuss what my goals were for my team and what I was going to start working on, and start talking about what the problems were and how I was going to address those and making sure that he was on board. Because for me, what I knew is as soon as one of them had an issue with me, they were going to go straight to him.
Right.
And that's in a decent work environment. They're gonna go straight to my boss because at that time I'm a new manager, new even though they all knew me and I had been working there, this is a whole new thing for them, and they
Mhm.
weren't sure that they even trusted me in the position. And so I already knew. And, I had to basically go to him, hey, this is what I'm doing, and make sure he was okay with it. Because then once I made the change, if they did go to him, then he could say, no, I support her in this or whatever. And then that would, that would settle that. So there was no surprises on his part. Even when I was like when I had some disciplinary action that I knew I was going to have to meet out with certain ones. He knew before I even did it. So when they came talking about, and there was a particular person that I had to let go, he knew well ahead of time that that was coming.
Mm,
because before I ever did anything, I was having discussions with him, and so for me, that helped me out a lot, and it created a situation where, there were no surprises for those that were above me, and I had conversations specifically with not only my boss but also our HR director to make sure that I did everything correctly. This is before I spoke to, the person that I had to they had to receive some consequences. And
mhm.
so I would tell anybody, definitely make sure that you use your boss and your human resources personnel, and make sure so that you're doing things the right way. Because if it blows up, you don't. If it goes in the wrong way, you don't want them to say, "Hey, we didn't know anything about it." You want to say, "Nope, they knew beforehand." And so if I'm doing something wrong, now is your time to tell me that I'm going in the wrong direction with it. And if you
So,
don't tell me that, then I can say, hey, I did my due diligence.
so here's my question. Now, you were able to do that in a reasonably healthy work environment where your boss is on. He definitely is on board and he's supporting you as a manager. You don't have so this is where we talk about how do these laws show up in a toxic situation. So what does a person do if they have undermining? So you don't have that in your dynamic. So now thinking from the point if he didn't support you and they are able to come to him and go around you.
Well, see, the question that's going to come up is if let's say, for instance, I have a boss that's going to undermine me, or they don't like me, or have to take issue with me for whatever reason. If
Mhm.
I go to them and I say, there is this issue with this particular person on my team, and I discuss, and I say, hey, how would you like for me to handle it? The
Mhm.
question that would come up then would be, because if I felt the need to, now mind you, we have a good working relationship, but our meetings are also recorded. So let me say that
Okay.
our meetings are recorded, and so when he is giving me direction, I have a transcript, and just like he has a transcript of everything that's said. And so when he's saying, hey, this is what you should do, or this is what I want you to do, then if he comes back and he tries to undermine me, it's like, no, this is what I can come back and say, this is what we agreed to, and why and why I moved in the direction that I moved in. Because for us, the goal is to protect the company, to make
Mhm.
sure that once I go through the process and I'm verified, like, and that's why I go to HR, because when somebody receives disciplinary action, the goal is to make sure that I'm following company protocol. I
Mhm.
want to make sure that the company is saying, this is what I need to do. These are all the steps. And then if they don't meet these steps, then they can be let go. There's no secret to anything that I'm doing. It's not off the cuff. I am literally following company protocol. And then once I do that and they want to come back, they don't, because at that point, he doesn't have anything to come back with me on to say I'm not doing it. And he's also given, so he's aware. He can either say yes or no. It's documented. HR has confirmed what the process is. Now I go to my teammate or my person on my team, and I put into action whatever it is we have already discussed.
Okay. So you're talking from a healthy work
Right.
environment.
Because if
Now
they
we're
come
talking.
back and say, well, nope, none of that happened, then yeah, you're going to be screwed. Because at the end of the day, if you're not able to, let's say, record the conversation, and they say the meeting didn't happen and nothing happened, you got a
That's never
problem.
the issue. They don't deny any of that stuff. They even like let's say the notification is there.
Yeah.
Everything is in place. The issue is
Hmm.
that it's a toxic work environment. So what happens is you anything that happens, you are the problem, no matter which way it goes. What does a person in leadership do? And my thing, I think like to answer like so looking at it from a top because we're looking at it from the perspective that everything is going to fall into place and people are going to adhere to the rules and even the company itself is going to adhere to its own policy and its own rules. Now, what happens if you're in a leadership position and your organization doesn't do that,
And
but they have
see,
a policy in place, and you
see,
find, go ahead.
okay, we had a managers meeting, and there was a conversation. Someone, another manager, not me, brought up the issue of people being on time, people coming in late.
Mm-hmm.
Okay,
Hmm.
and dealing with people coming in late. Our boss basically talked about, yes, I don't want to be really strict, but people need to be here on time. They need to be dependable. We need to know where they are. At that point, I said, well, I have a question about that. And so, of course, they look at me and I said, what are we considering on time? What's on time? What?
That's
Because
a $1 million question, isn't it?
exactly,
It's crazy. Like, this is an issue every job. I don't care where you are, because attendance is always an issue, because people, they want to come when they can get there. And if they were there late, they expect you to just get over it. And it's like, yeah, I get that. But they don't think about the back end of it, that
hmm
there are other issues, there are other employees. And so now, what if everybody just comes in when they feel like
exactly. And I brought that very thing up. We had a conversation about dress code. And I said, and I brought up and they were talking about different people wearing different shoes and all of that. And I said, well, because they were talking about the types of shoes that men would wear, the men specifically. And I
it?
said, I don't, and I told them flat out, I don't want to tell my guys to dress a certain way, and I don't want to hold a certain standard. And then they're looking around at the rest of the company wearing just whatever. So
That's the issue. That's the
yeah,
issue. So, like, here's the thing: if you have one part of the organization in compliance, they start looking around like, wait a minute, why
hmm
we have to do it and they don't? They
exactly.
literally are like children. It's like, hey, they get to do it too.
And
And what
that's
do you do with that?
and that is what I brought up. And so when it comes to things like that specifically, I just let it go. I paid attention to what I basically put the rule out there, and then I watched what other managers did and how they let their departments go. And if they let them do it, then I let it go. Because I'm not going to be the only one holding to a standard that nobody else was supporting, because I
Okay,
don't think that that's
now
fair.
let's flip that. That isn't fair. So
Yeah.
now let's flip it to a toxic work environment, because that makes sense. In a healthy work environment, we're going to, when in Rome, everybody's going to have the same treatment across the board.
Yeah.
Now, what if your supervisor comes and writes you up for failure to supervise because you see your team's doing this and you're not, or they just come and verbally reprimand you because you're not addressing your team member?
Then the question is going to become, my question is going to be, so does my team have to do something that the other teams don't have to do?
This isn't about the other teams. This is about your team.
And what is the rule for the company? So does this have to be a different rule? Because
The
because
policy
this
is
is
the policy. You know what the
no,
policy
because
is. You
I'm
have
not
the book.
asking it. I'm not
You have
asking
the
the
book.
question. I'm not asking the question for me. I'm asking for the team. Because as far as I'm concerned, it could go either way. The issue
You
is,
have the handbook.
and
You
that's
know
what
what
they're
it
going to say.
says.
And that's what they're going to say. And I'm going to say, and that's fine. But if no one else is going to implement this, it doesn't matter. And so, but you're going
And
to be
so
dealing with somebody that's going
here's
to
the
be
thing. So,
difficult
like,
with you no matter what.
you want to argue that from a rational perspective, but
Yeah,
we're
but
talking
they're not
about
being
legal.
rational.
They're not. The rule is in place. The
Yeah,
policy is in place. You not Your failure to supervise because you did not enforce the rule. Other
right.
people may be broken the rule, but the situation is, this is not about them. This is about you. You can argue all day long, because here's the thing: even though they're wrong
Yeah,
morally,
yeah,
policy wise, they're not.
right.
You need to enforce the policy.
Then more
That's
than
your
likely
job.
I would, and that if that's the case, I would probably go to my team and tell them exactly that.
Now you're
Yeah.
being toxic. Now you are engaged in toxic.
No, 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 no. I would go to them and I would tell them exactly that. I would say, this is the policy, this is what it says. And they said, well, nobody else is doing it. And I'm like, and that's not what I was told. I was told that this is what we are to do, and they will handle everybody else. And then
Right.
that's it. This is what I was told. This is what we do. We all have to wear blue on Thursdays. And so they will handle what everybody else wears. We all have to wear blue on Thursday.
Well, now,
And now if they don't like that, they
oh
have
no,
the
you ain't
right,
let me put the remix
and
on you.
they have the right to escalate that. If they have a problem with that, they can go to the human resources and say, well, why is it that we have to wear blue on Thursday and nobody else has to wear blue on Thursday? And they
And
can dispute that if they want to, but
and
that's
I
not.
have said that. I've told people
Yeah.
when they have issues with that, that is something for you to dispute. If you have disparate treatment, if you feel like you are being held to a standard nobody else has to follow, you are more than welcome to file a complaint.
Mm-hmm.
I,
Yeah.
on the other hand, have to follow the policy. Now,
Right.
there they go. They file a complaint. Now, let's say your boss says, "Oh, that's okay, Jim. Go ahead and wear that."
I know. See, that's when you get, and that's when the problem comes in. Because then I ask, okay,
It's okay today.
so so then you ask, when you ask, why is it okay for them to wear that today? Then what's the question? Then what's the answer? I mean,
You
you
being
said that we
insubordinate.
can't wear it, so why
You're
are
being
you saying?
insubordinate in her questioning your
Yeah,
direct. I gave a
and
directive.
you know what that where the issue with that comes in
What?
is what I would kind of wonder is whether they do that with the other teams, and it sounds like they don't.
No,
And so if they're not doing it with the other team, then it doesn't matter what you do.
no.
Yeah,
You. That's why I said it's a catch 22. You
yeah,
there. It's set up to be lose lose. No matter which way you move, you
yeah,
lose.
yeah.
So now how? And I was like, so now how do you teach the law of the lid from the or the law of influence? And this is also the law of respect. How do you teach that to somebody? Are you being is it being um kind of hypocritical to say that the laws of leadership, can they survive? Can the laws of leadership survive toxicity?
Um, See, the challenge that comes in is I think the principles are there. I just don't know, and you can learn the principles. I just don't know that it will work when somebody is dead set on doing the opposite of whatever it is you're saying anyway. Because if the law of the lid says, okay, I'm going to try to maximize my potential. The problem is you can try to do that. The problem is you're not going to be able to go very far based on the leadership that you have.
Yeah, so that's why I said I think for the law of the lid, I think within the organization, your leadership is capped. I
Yeah,
think you can still grow. You will
yeah,
just be outside of the organization.
right,
But
right.
what does leadership for you look like in practice? I think you can raise your lid in terms of, because I do think I look at a toxic work environment as a forge. That's why I'm teaching
Mm-hmm.
um, on the other channel. It's a forge where you are being honed into a better blade, right? And so
Yeah,
what you have to do is you, instead of, the first thing to me is the mindset.
yeah,
You have to work on changing your mind. If
yeah.
you can't change your situation, change the way you think about it. Look at
True,
yourself as being molded, honed,
yeah,
so you can grow. I think take
true,
making that shift. I think just if you get to the point where you're not in the victim mindset, that already raised your lid. Then when you can
yeah,
get to the perspective of what is there to learn here? What, like, so that situation right there, like let's say that convoluted situation happened. What could you learn from that? You can learn to, number one, learn how to you can practice detachment. You can practice
yep,
your integrity, right? You will follow
mm-hmm,
the rules regardless.
yeah,
You will not, and then here's the hardest part, you will not usurp authority. You will follow the chain.
Yeah.
If the chain is so, that's what David did. Saul was trying to kill David, but what would David say? Touch not thine anointment and do thy prophet no harm.
Mm-hmm.
That is how you raise that lid there. And a law of influence, whether you know it or not, people are always watching. How you comport yourself, how you move, your conduct matters.
That is so true. That's very, very true.
And it's hard. It's something that has been very difficult for me to navigate, and it's something that I'm learning in real time. And I feel like, the Bible tells us that we're watchmen and cry loud and spread not. And so I'm like, as I have my experiences, I feel the moral obligation to come and share it too. And I know some people, you don't want to hear that you have to change. But if you're going to grow and be a leader, you do have to change, because guess what? Adaptability is going to be one of your greatest strengths. When they attack how you make the lemonade, find another way to squeeze, but make the
Mm-hmm.
lemonade, get it done. And so for me, that's just where it is with that. It's like, okay, if this is wrong, then what do I do differently? So if they're going to attack how I do blah blah blah, well, I got to find another way. And sometimes that even means I have to go out and inquire of other people. And that's the other point of having wise counsel. This is why, like, I even build my AI to give me direction and play situations off. But I have good leadership at home. So, and I know everybody that helps a lot,
Yeah.
because we can have these conversations. My husband has the ability to point out to me when my ego, like we had a conversation earlier, because I was talking about how do I sit here on the Sabbath and teach these 21 irrefutable laws of leadership and not feel like a hypocrite, and when I turn around on the Working Class Chronicles and teach how to navigate a toxic work environment, because do they go together? That's the because, like, even for my own little structure of learning here, do these go together? And I'm learning as we sat and we've talked, and I'm breaking it down. They do still work. These laws work. You can raise your lid by number one. It's going to require. So for me, if you notice, what did I do? I started building my own leadership program. I'm building my own inner citadel. I started studying stoicism more than just the casual readings here and there I was doing. I've really gotten serious about it. I'm going here and dust off my copy of the Enchiridion. It just made, and I tell you what, it also made me start looking at people like Robert Greene differently. I watched an interview of his, and he was saying that he didn't write the 48 laws of power for you to live by them. He said, if you live by those rules, people are going to hate you and you're going to be alone. But you need to understand that there are people who do operate like this. They don't care that people hate them or that they're alone. I'm paraphrasing here, but it's real. Like, you are going to be around people in this world who live like this, who are actively engaged in office warfare. That never occurred to me, Zell. I never thought until, and as a matter of fact, it didn't become real to me until um, a person told a counsel of mine that I know you're my enemy, and I was like, damn, if they are the enemy, what am I? It was a wake up call. And that's when I shifted and started looking at these other dynamics. That can be a lid raising experience as well. Now, where I struggled was like, so we go over here and let's see if I did a slide for it. The law of influence. How do you think the law of influence shows up in a toxic work environment? So, the law of influence. True leadership is about influence, not authority or a position. People will not follow someone they are not influenced by. So, let's say you are persona non grata. You're not going to be able to influence that environment. So, what do you do, Zell?
That I do not know, because if we're talking about an entire environment and there's no one else there that's outside of the fray, or Beyond that, I don't know. I'm now this one I'm at a loss with. I'm not sure.
So, would you say that influence is about how you show up as well? It's about what you do and your integrity, your character, how you consistently stick to it.
It is. It is, and I think that because see what's going to happen is you've got to have somebody that's not in it. Because as
Mhm.
long if there are other people there that aren't, they may see like if it's you and one or two other people,
Mhm.
and then you're actually trying to do the right thing and you're sticking to the rule and you're being consistent, then you can influence because other people will see what's happening. Other people out, but they have to be people that are outside of the toxic portion of that. It's not
Right.
going to be
I agree
so
with that.
you're not really going to be able to influence your boss. You're not going to be able to influence somebody that flat out don't like you and they're against you anyway.
Right.
Or it would take something major. I'll just say something major would have to happen for that influence to get through to them. But it would have to be somebody else on the outside kind of looking in at that situation that, that would, and I will say this, it can definitely happen because if you're dealing with a toxic person, then excuse me, that's not going to be limited to just you. Eventually somebody else is going to get on their bad side and they're going
Right.
to they're going to end up turning on somebody else as well. So but that's also it's unfortunate when the leadership, when the person at the very top is the one that's causing the problems, because
Mhm.
that it makes me wonder how well can how productive can that department be when the main person is problematic. I just don't know.
Yeah, if the main person is problematic, I think it depends on the organization too. Like, what do
Hmm.
you? Because if there are aspects of the, because actually when I think about it, it's all in every job you still have your duties that you do.
Right.
So even if the person is toxic, you still have to do your job, right?
Absolutely. But see, I
So
guess, but it makes me wonder how effective are you though? If you're,
well,
because
you
I
can only
get
be as effective as you can be.
right, and I think that's where the problems start to come in. How long can you last? How long can you last in a toxic work environment? But and I say this to say because if it's that bad, then it's just a matter. They're gonna try to get you gone. Their
Oh
their
yeah,
goal is to get
I
you
mean that's the
gone.
whole goal anyway. And
Yeah,
and the numbers say the average person in a toxic work environment tends to make it 2 years.
yeah, yeah. Either they're gonna quit or
So
their boss is gonna get rid of them.
yeah,
So.
unless something else happens, yeah, you have approximately a 2 year window. So that's why I'm looking at the window.
Oh my goodness.
you know, it's unfortunate. It's interesting though, and I think you can learn a lot about yourself. But one thing I'm learning too is a lot of things um in a toxic work environment you just have to tap out of. You have to,
Yeah.
because a lot of what happens too, if especially if it is a personal thing, a lot of the attacks are of a personal nature. So you can learn how to put up a deflector shield. Now, not to say that the work isn't being weaponized, but it depending on the work that you do, some of the work can be there are some things that you can I think there are some things you can kind of just let it pass. You
Hmm.
know, and not saying don't do the work. I'm saying you just the criticism, because a lot of times
Right.
it's just to provoke you, like it's just
Right.
done, or like if it's just to get an emotional reaction out of you. Because the whole purpose is to make no doubt about it, it is to get you to do something so they can fire you. And most of
Hmm.
the time, it is to antagonize and harass you until you explode.
Hmm.
This is why we have the forge. This is why we talk about building the inner citadel. This is why we talk about having those people that wise counsel. So when you get in those situations, you think before you respond. You practice the power of the pause. You jade, because if you're somebody who maybe you're close to retirement and you're not ready to, or you're just not in a situation where you can just jump jobs like that, but you have to stay. So my whole purpose is to teach a strategic frame to help you exist until you can do something differently.
Yeah, very true. Um,
So, because I think the idea of just quit, people do that. If it was just easy to quit, they would have done that.
yeah,
You
yeah.
know. So
And it's
I don't
not
know.
an easy thing.
Yeah, and especially if we look at the job market right now, and then we're talking about all they were just talking about the number of women that have exited the job force right now, and you're talking about they're talking about 1 million women, and
Mm,
for reasons like the toxic work environment was one of them. Child care was definitely one of them. So there's a lot of women who just opted out of all of this type of stuff.
wow.
Yeah, I was really shocked to look at that, and and especially to me, it's really bad when women do things to. I was listening to this TED talk, and one of the ladies was her speech was, I'll send it to you,
Mm,
about how women tend to be some of the. You talk about the glass ceiling. Women tend to be the ones holding a lot of other women back.
hmm. Really?
Yeah, and you wouldn't think that. You'd think the other thing women would be like, yeah, I'm going to help another woman, get help another woman to move forward. But no, most of the time, the majority of the time, it's the opposite. I was
Hmm.
like, that's interesting.
Did they say why?
What did she say? So, because there was a couple pieces. You know what? Let me see if I can find it. And part of it seemed to me that it was just that in the interest of everybody has to be the same. Yeah, that's what. There it is. Everybody needs to be the same. So you rising above them, it won't be equal anymore.
Hmm?
Yeah. So they have to keep you where they are because we all got to be the same.
Wow.
Isn't that interesting? And we talk about crabs in the barrel. That literally is a crab in the barrel mentality. I'm going to pull you. I'm going to keep you down here because I don't want you to get above me. We all need to be the
Hmm.
same.
Wow.
It made me think, and I was like, that's why I wanted to go back and look at this. And I'm like, do I move forward with this like this? Does this make sense? But as we're talking through it and just breaking it down, I can see, and even the 21 indispensable qualities of a leader, your character is going to be the thing that keeps you consistent in trying and practicing those other laws. Now, I don't think charisma really will work in a toxic work environment.
Uh-uh.
I mean, but you maybe have the ability to influence some people around you on the outside. So I guess it depends on what you're doing. But
Yeah.
yeah, but you
And I
definitely want.
think
Mhm.
and I think now with charisma, this is my thing with it is it's one thing when you're being genuinely nice and you're making a point to speak to people, just being friendly and open. It's something else when you're just kind of brown nosing. And that's the thing to me about charisma. That's when I've seen people, excuse me, I've seen people try to be very, very, not necessarily being charismatic, but being very, it was obvious that they were being
Manipulative.
fake. Yeah,
Yeah.
and manipulative. And it's just like, okay, you're saying all this stuff because you're trying to get on my good side. You don't actually mean any of it. You're trying to, because I know it is because we're talking about this. I know one person specifically that I think he's been trying to use the 48 laws of power, and I can just see it in the way that he moves
Mm.
and the way that he'll come and talk to me and how he'll just respond and how he will be with other people, the things he will do with other people. And apparently, I don't think it's been working for him the way he thought it would. you
Well, Robert
know,
Green would tell him that it doesn't work that way.
because
He maybe
nobody
needs to
likes
watch
him.
some of the videos. I'm like,
Were you gonna
I'm
play the video? Were you gonna play the audio?
I didn't find it. No, I was saying he needs to watch some of the
Oh
Robert Green
yeah.
interviews, and he'll find that the point was never for you to start trying to practice these laws. Let me see. Women. And if like, are you trying to
That's so
implement these
funny.
creative laws of power? Because I think you need to go watch this Robert Green interview. Let's see. Mm, no, see, I see this. Oh, that's a. I might have to watch this one. It says the likability dilemma for women leaders. For women leaders. Yeah, and I will definitely say I have the my motto for the week is just like, hey, um, this might be it. Hold on. Appeasement doesn't work. If you are in a toxic work environment, you cannot even in a healthy work environment, any environment. I would even say even at home with your children, you should not be operating from a trying to people please perspective, because I do think it teaches them toxicity as well. And they don't learn good healthy skills. They think that everything needs to be everybody and everything is a situation that needs to be bribed, manipulated, schmoozed. I don't think it's a healthy perspective, and it's not a way to hold power. It's not a way to hold influence that matters, right? Where your character, where people actually like you and not what they can do for you. Because if they don't like you, they're not going to like you. The idea of leadership is to actually fulfill your role, you know and I'm gonna tell you, buying people doesn't work. It definitely doesn't work. And people don't respect you. All they do is keep coming back for more, and then when you don't have any more, they are ready to turn on you. So I think this is it. Did you have anything to add to that last point I made?
No, I didn't. I think you were right on point. I know I
Okay.
have gotten caught up in that, and I had to learn the hard way that there's no such thing. I mean, because it's always going to be, they're always going to come back for more.
Yeah, I learned that the hard way too recently. Just follow the rules. If they want to bend the rules, they need to submit something in writing asking for an exemption, and then you escalate it up. Let them make the decision.
My name
Here,
is Maureen Fitzgerald, and I am a recovering lawyer.
can you hear Zell?
Yes,
Zell.
I hear it. I hear it.
Okay.
About 10 years ago, I went to an event almost exactly like this one. I remember the auditorium and seeing a sea of black and gray suits and crisp white blouses. It was 200 women lawyers, and I felt like I had arrived, that this was my tribe. I didn't know that that event would change the course of my life. But before I go on, I have to come clean. Although my talk today is about removing the barriers that hold women back, I was not always interested in gender inequality. In fact, I was one of those lawyers who had her nose firmly to the grindstone. I worked absurd hours, and I didn't care that I wasn't invited to the golf games or client lunches. I did what I had to do to succeed. But on that night, my eyes were opened. I remember settling into my seat and looking up at the stage, and I saw this young guy in jeans and a t-shirt. And I thought, oh, technical problems. But then he began to approach the podium. And this was his first slide: the 7 fatal mistakes that women make. And this young man, for the next 45 minutes, told all of these women and me in the room precisely what we were doing wrong. We were wearing the wrong clothes. We were saying the wrong things. We weren't assertive enough. We weren't aggressive enough. And worst of all, is that we were doing a disservice to our clients. I remember going home that night in a bit of a fog, and it wasn't until the next morning when I woke up and I had this aha. What if women aren't the problem? What if the way we think about women is the problem? So I spent the next 8 years researching the topic. I pursued a doctorate degree.
So this isn't the one, but I am interested to see what she's gonna say for the first one. There's one called Queen Bee Syndrome. I think that's probably gonna be more in line with it, but that's not the speaker either. But I'm interested in seeing that one too. So you want me to play more of this one?
Yes, I'd like to hear more of it. Sounds
Okay,
interesting.
it does.
And wrote 3 books on the topic. And I have to tell you, I am completely delighted to be here tonight to tell you what I know. So let me start by stating the obvious. Although women have been graduating in equal numbers for about 20 years from universities and colleges across North America, they remain grossly underrepresented at the top. Today, women represent about 5% of the CEOs of the big corporations, about 20% of our elected representatives, and about 25% of the highest level academic positions. In fact, of the top 1,500 organizations in the United States, there are more CEOs with the name John than there are women. But there's also some really good news. And the good news is this: there's a huge amount of growing research on the benefits of women. We know that including women and full participation of women today can accelerate the global economy, can increase corporate profits, and can even improve all of our standard of living. A small known fact is that during the Icelandic financial meltdown, there's only one financial firm that survived, and that was a firm of 4 women. Another small known fact is that when microlenders lend money to women, they not only end up with more money themselves, and the women end up with more money, but so too do families and communities. Study after study has said repeatedly that including women is not just the right thing to do, it's the economic thing to do. So if we know that women are so amazing, why is there still such a huge gender gap? So some of you might recall the well overwatched TED Talk by Sheryl Sandberg, the COO of Facebook. Sheryl Sandberg not only did a TED Talk, but she also followed it up by a best-selling book called Lean In. And in that book, she did an amazing job of describing all of the barriers, or many of the barriers, that held women back, for everything from subtle discrimination to sexual harassment. But Sheryl did something very interesting. Instead of focusing on those barriers, she decided to focus on women. And so her message, initially at least, was raise your hand more, sit at the table, be more courageous. And although these are probably very good pieces of advice for individual women, there's a couple of problems with this focus on women. The first is that it places the full burden of the change on women. We expect women to attend courses, read more books, and work even harder to bridge the gender gap. The second is that those women who act just a bit too assertive end up suffering a backlash, these subtle penalties for acting in a way that's just a bit too masculine. And the third problem is a crisis of confidence that I actually personally suffered after 10 years of law practice. It should come as no surprise after wearing black, stiff gray suits, gray and black suits, wearing ugly black shoes, and even blow drying my hair straight for 10 years, that I didn't know who I was. And it's no surprise that I suffered from the so-called imposter syndrome.
Dealt with that.
Me too. I really have. I can relate to
The
everything that
biggest
she's
problem
saying.
of all, of urging women to lean in and focusing exclusively in on women, is this: every single one of you who's not a woman climbing the corporate ladder gets off the hook. And not only that, but we can comfortably ignore all of the research that points to very specific barriers that continue to hold women back. So let me tell you a story. A little while ago, a father and his son were in a car accident. And the father walked away, but the son was badly injured. So he called an ambulance, drove the son to the hospital, and the son was being wheeled into the surgery when the surgeon came in and looked at the boy and said, "I can't operate on that boy. He's my son." So the question for you is, who is the surgeon? Now I see a few of you scratching your heads, and I want to tell you this: the surgeon's a mother. But the reason we don't often see the surgeon as the mother, and it kind of messes us up, is because of this thing in our heads called implicit bias. We don't see women as surgeons. And implicit bias is the main cause of the gender gap today. What's implicit bias? Some of you already know. It's basically unconscious ideas in your head that are going around and around, and some of them are really good and some of them not so good. But for women, there are 3 particular types of implicit bias that are deeply troublesome. The first is male preference. Now, you may not know this, but the research is quite clear. Both men and women prefer males. Not only do we prefer males, but we actually prefer masculine characteristics. There's a very well-known research study called the Heidi and Howard study, and this is fantastic. It's just simply a professor deciding one day to hand out one resume to her whole group of students. Unbeknownst to the students, she decided to put Heidi at the top of one and Howard at the top of the other resume. And then she asked them to give her feedback. And what she discovered is this: although all the students agreed that Heidi and Howard had the same credentials and competence level, they rarely selected Heidi. And what the students said is this: they didn't like Heidi and they didn't trust Heidi. The second type of bias that is particularly troublesome for women is called in-group favoritism. Now, we all know this because it just simply means we like to be around people who look and act like us. There's only one problem, and that is if all of the corporations, all of the elected officials, and all of the top-level academic positions are occupied by men, they tend to only invite in those men and women who look and act like them. The third barrier is what the researchers called the maternal wall, and it's a whole bundle of barriers, but it's particularly bad for women. It's simply this idea that somehow women in childbearing ages are incompetent. They're too sensitive, they're too emotional, they're too caring, they're too a lot of things. We just assume this about women. But worse is that they're not committed to their jobs. The minute you have a child, you're less committed to your job, which ironically is the opposite that we feel for men, because as soon as men have children, we all assume that he's going to be more committed to his job. But what I found interesting about this is these particular 3 groups of biases have one common root. And what surprised me when I looked at them all and stepped back is something very interesting that I had discovered or heard about for the first time 30 years ago. I was in an economics class in first year university. Why I signed up for economics, I don't know. And a substitute professor came in and she said, "Oh dear, economics. I don't know anything about economics, but I want to tell you about my most amazing pink and blue diaper research." So she said, what we did is we brought in these 20 babies boy and girl babies, but we dressed them at random in pink and blue diapers. And then we invited parents in to hold the babies. And then we videotaped the whole thing. And she said the most amazing thing happened. The parents held the pink diaper babies very close to their bodies and spoke to them in very soft tones like, "Isn't she so sweet?" And the blue diaper babies, the parents held the babies away from their bodies and spoke to them in somewhat louder tones like, "Oh, you're a tough guy." So what's interesting to me is this is just 5 minutes of parental implicit bias. So imagine a lifetime. And then my friends say to me, yeah, the the diapers, whatever, Maureen, pink and blue diapers. What on earth does that have to do with the gender gap? And this is what I tell them. In our society, we take a pink box and we label it as feminine. And then we squeeze in all of our girls and women, squeeze them in and tell them they have to be certain things like nice and kind and sweet and all of these things and many more. And then we take a blue box and we label it as masculine. And we squeeze all our men and boys into this box and we tell them they have to be tough and aggressive and unemotional and many, many more things. And that's not very good. But here's the interesting thing. In our society, we take this blue box and we elevate it. We raise it up and we say this blue box, males and masculine traits and masculine roles, are more important to our society. And then we take this pink box and we lower it down and we say females and female roles and feminine characteristics are less valuable to our society. And that is what I call pink and blue bias. And that is the taproot of all gender inequality in the world. And before I get to solutions, because that's the fun part of the talk, I want to ask you this one question. Who invented these boxes? So there's a number of solutions. I'm just going to tell you about 2 of them. The most obvious is socialization. The first thing we have to do is get rid of the pink and blue boxes. We have to raise our children outside the box. We have to raise them in a way where they're truly equals. Then we have to define masculine and feminine much differently. And then we have to get rid of the stereotypes that we carry around every single day. But this is really hard work. And it's because implicit bias is not just invisible, it's deeply imprinted in us, almost like DNA. So it would take a very long time to change those biases. As well, we are all swimming in a culture filled with media messages, and TVs and magazines that reinforce this pink and blue bias all the time. But the good news is there's this emerging body of science, and it's called Designing for Equality. And I just want to share a few ideas with you around this. The best example of designing for equality is the Boston Symphony Orchestra. And what the Boston Symphony Orchestra realized one day is they couldn't attract women. They didn't know why, what it was they were doing wrong. So one day they decided to put a huge curtain between the musicians who were being interviewed for the orchestra and the selection panel. And before long, they had hired a huge number of women. The other one I love to talk about was just simply blind resumes, which means you take a resume and you just black out the name of the person on the top so they couldn't be discriminated against. But I have 3 more I want to share with you really quickly, and that is quotas. It just simply means holding a seat at the table for women, leaving a place open so that they can join. The second is actually my secret. I think this is the solution to gender inequality, if I were going to put my money there. It's flexible work. It just simply means working anywhere, anytime. But the great thing for women is women are the ones who typically do the housework and raise the children. So when they leave the workplace and come back in, they suffer severe penalties. So flexible work would solve that problem very quickly. And another one is transparent pay, which I think by just disclosing what you earn, we could end the gender pay gap tomorrow. Not only that, but it would really help us understand why we pay certain jobs more than others. So I often think back of that fateful night when that young man walked across the stage and told me and 200 other women that we were doing everything wrong. In fact, I'm standing here today because of him, because I don't want my daughters, I don't want your daughters, I don't want any woman in the world to feel like she's not quite good enough. So what can you do today? Number one, we must stop asking women to lean in. We must instead focus on the very real barriers identified in the research. Number two, we must all admit that we are biased and challenge those biases every single day. And third, men and women, if you really want an equal society, not just gender equality, if you really want that, you have to come together. We have to come together. Step outside of our boxes. Put down our differences, because we are all casualties of our limited thinking. And the next time you get the delight and honor and privilege to hold a baby in your arms, whether it's a boy or a girl, you just simply have to say, "You are amazing." Thank you very much.
That was 7 years ago.
Wow. Wow. Huh.
And it's funny, it's like it's still the same.
Yeah.
And it's always funny, like you can even watch movie videos and things from the 60s and 70s, and you just see just how much a lot of things have changed, but the important things are still the same. You
Yeah.
know, the things that should have been a priority to change, we've made no movement, we've made no ground. You can watch a video in the 60s of them talking about police brutality and injustice, and we're still here. So
Yep.
now this next one is the queen bee syndrome. You ready?
Yes.
Okay.
My name is Zenzi Natasha Alasis. I'm a geologist by profession with just over 16 years experience in the mining industry of Namibia. I'm the founding president of the Women in Mining Association of Namibia, and I'm currently the vice president of the Association of Women in Mining in Namibia, in Africa, correction. I now consult on gender and governance in the mining industry, as well as mineral exploration. And I'm the proud owner of a coffee shop that bears my name. When we started the Women in Mining movement in Namibia, often I was asked, why is it so important to achieve gender equality? Or they would say to me, much to my annoyance really, if it is not broken, why are you trying to fix it? And the one that really got to me was when a male colleague of mine said to me, Zenzi, as an African man, I do not understand why you are trying to fight for gender equality. This one really, really got to me because he was nearly in his mid-30s. Not an old Ndala. He was in his mid-30s, and here's the other catch. We studied together to enter this mining industry. So I asked him, so when we were studying together to become earth scientists in the mining industry, did you see me as an African woman or as a future colleague in the mining industry? He kept quiet for a bit and I said, here's my card. I will teach you about that a bit later on. But it's also then that I decided that I will make it my mission in life to turn my voice into an invoice and teach on the importance of gender, of why we must achieve gender equality. They say that if you were to ask a Greek of the time of Socrates, what is the greatest war of history? They would probably, and with most certainty, mention the Trojan War. This was a war between the Greeks and the city of Troy, and this war lasted for about 10 years. And it finally ended when the Greeks retreated from the camp and left behind a large wooden horse outside the gates of Troy. Inside Troy, there were many debates of whether we should bring in this horse or not, because this horse was left as a gift, supposed gift. The plan for this wooden horse it was wheeled in front of the city. And after the Trojan horse was left there, eventually the horse was laid inside. Because the Trojans thought it was a gift that would bring them fortune, they partied like, well, it was in the 1100s. The Greeks left behind a double agent, and his mission was to convince the Trojans that the Greeks have left, bring in the horse, let's celebrate, and ultimately this would give the Trojans a fortune. However, once night fell and they were tired of partying, the horse was brought in, it was opened up, and out came the Greek soldiers. From the inside of the city, the Greeks were able to destroy the city of Troy and win the war eventually. Ladies and gentlemen, gender equality is much like a city under siege, like Troy was. And concepts such as sexism, toxic masculinity, and patriarchal oppressions are like the Trojan horse. These are the known enemies. So sexism, toxic masculinity, and patriarchal oppression are the known enemies to gender equality. It's often openly addressed, it is kept at bay, and it is being addressed. Many governments and organizations, especially those in industries which are previously dominated mostly by males, have launched aggressive campaigns on trying to achieve gender equality. These efforts place emphasis on the importance of gender diversity and gender inclusion in our quest to achieve gender equality. So because of these efforts, these enemies are quickly losing ground. And there is no doubt that there is progress, but it is painfully slow. So if these enemies are losing ground, why is it then that the known enemies are not shrinking? The progress is slow because there is an enemy within. Now, before I unmask this devious enemy within the walls of gender equality, let's look at some of the damage caused by the enemy that we know. The efforts of raised awareness on gender diversity and to a certain extent gender inclusion resulted in a higher percentage of females at the entry level of our careers, which basically means we are seeing more women entering the labor force, especially in sectors that were traditionally occupied by men, of which I'm a perfect example. I'm a geologist in an industry, so my career was basically known as you don't see women there. But because of these efforts, I was one of those who was brought in here. That's gender diversity. But it's very important to realize that just because you're seeing more women around you, it does not mean that you've achieved gender equality. As the pipeline progresses, we consistently see lower representations of females, with very few management and executive directorship and senior management. And that's where I want to bring your attention to. This here is what we call the proverbial glass ceiling. Personally, this is the wall I was staring at when I left the mining industry, full-time employment in the mining industry 2 years ago. This is the glass ceiling that needs to be broken, or so we think. This is the part that we need. When I said we, I'm talking about us females. This is the part where we need to be in. I'll tell you why. Because this is where decision-making takes place. This is where the benefit of gender diversity is realized on condition that it is coupled with gender inclusion. That is when we will have achieved gender equality. Now, the leaky pipeline, as we call it, demonstrates that gender diversity alone does not mean that equality has been achieved. Diversity is important, but inclusion is crucial. Now, the Leadship pipeline showed us that most industries are more diverse, isn't it? But do not place, unfortunately, enough emphasis on inclusion. And if you look at the definition of UN Women for Equality, it basically means, simply put, that economic implications of not achieving equality are quite significant. And we need to achieve gender equality as a matter of urgency. If I were to tell you that last night I got home and I come to my assistance and open the gate for me. I thanked my gardener and drove in, hoping that my housekeeper had cooked because I was really exhausted. Imagine walking into my house to find that the dinner was not prepared. Stop. How many of you thought that my gardener was a man? How many of you thought that my housekeeper was a woman? But I did not tell you what gender they were. Unconscious bias is defined as a social stereotype about certain groups of people that we form outside of our own conscious mind. In other words, how a person thinks can depend on their own life experiences. And sometimes they have beliefs and views about other people that might not be right or reasonable. This means that they could make a decision influenced by false beliefs or assumptions. Sometimes this is called stereotyping. Unconscious bias is mostly encouraged by deeply entrenched cultural and social norms, and it has a dire consequence that dwarfs the efforts of gender diversity and inclusion. The real enemy within is unconscious bias, and it has dire consequences. And here's the newsflash. We are all guilty of it. I've just demonstrated it. And I said all, both genders, male and female. So why then, if we're all guilty of it, do we perceive that the enemy to achieving gender equality is patriarchy? Consider this. The reality is that women are less likely to hold leadership and managerial positions in professions that are especially densely populated by male. One consequence of unconscious bias with us females is queen-beeism, Beatrice. Queen-beeism, it really isn't our fault. It is a response to the negative stereotypes and discrimination women encounter at the workplace. In an ideal world, women could easily support each other at work. However, through implicit gender bias, some of us engage in queen-beeism and fail to support other women in their field. Why? Because we hyper-compete and bully each other because we see the other as a threat. We want to protect the position as, I am the first female geologist. I am the first female woo-hoo to be out there. So we tear each other down by using slander, and we gossip about each other, and we stomp on each other. All this because we're trying to crack that glass ceiling, because we're trying to lean in. So if you are a queen bee, if you're a woman in leadership, doesn't have to be a senior manager. You can be a supervisor, you have subordinates below you, and you describe yourself as more aggressive, more risk-taking, and competitive than your female subordinates. You physically and psychologically distance yourself from other women. I've had a case where somebody said to me, I have 2 boys, so I'm not interested in gender equality. Yeah. So by doing so, you reinforce the gender hierarchy by stereotyping other women. And you're denying that discrimination against women exists because you want to be seen as, I'm part of the boys. So by so doing, you're not supporting the efforts to fight gender equality. And the other thing is, once you've cracked that ceiling, you think you have arrived, and then you take on the promised land mentality and become super territorial of that space because you're thinking, I have arrived and I don't want to rock the boat. Let me
That's real talk. I think a lot of women keep other women out of situations because of that alone. They want to be the only woman in a sea of men. And when other women come in, they get territorial and feel threatened.
Hmm.
demonstrate this with an example. It's a real life example. A few years ago, I attended a women's conference in South Africa. So I noticed that one of my colleagues were there, and she had been a senior manager for years at this particular workplace. And she was recently, at that point, appointed as an executive committee member. However, none substantively. So I was very proud, and I ran to her and I'm like, hey, congratulations. How do you feel? What are we going to do about this? She goes, do what? Because me, I'm quite happy that I got here. I'm not interested in non-substantive appointment. I'm not interested in all of that. I have arrived, she said to me. I was too shocked to respond because here I am, a middle manager who's aspiring to one day become the CEO of the mine, and a senior lady says to me, I don't care. Newsflash, the ceiling is not made out of glass, ladies. It's a thick perspex which has been hardened by the effects of unconscious bias. And you will need the joint efforts of your sisters, those below you, to crack it. You need to send the elevator down. That's the elevator that got you there. And if it's stuck, as it would sometimes do because of unconscious bias, use your angle to pull a sister up. The sad reality is that queen beeism is really bad for us. It decreases gender diversity in the workplace and creates barriers for all women to succeed in their careers. In other words, it limits gender diversity and inclusion, thus spoiling the foundation upon which gender equality is supposed to be built. So how do we tackle this enemy within? How should we tackle it? Firstly, recognize the Trojan Wars and the enemy within. Remember that diversity alone does not mean that equality has been achieved. If we are to build the nations, both male and female needs to be equally represented for practical solutions that will serve society. Secondly, let us be cognizant of our biases. And this will require a complete paradigm shift from us all. Let's mentor each other because mentorship allows us to empower and give others permission to achieve as much as you have and perhaps more. Especially reciprocal mentorship that allows for mutual beneficial relationship for both the mentor and mentee and allows us to develop sustainable relationships with social, political, and environmental systems we participate in. Let's coach each other. It allows us to spot the potential in somebody else and help them to realize that potential. Let's inspire each other, because inspiring each other encourages us to push their limits and helps us to achieve greater exploits due to exemplary performance. I'd like to end this by giving you a quote that I really believe we need to achieve gender equality because the far-reaching effects of gender equality will impact not just nations, but can have an impact continentally as well as globally. Let us stand together and tackle the enemy within by consciously and sustainably combating unconscious bias. Thank you.
It would hit my eye to step away. So I'm gonna look for that other one. I don't know. I don't remember the title of it, but I'll find it. But those were good though. Those were interesting.
Mm.
So any final thoughts before we get out of here, Zell?
Um, nothing right off the top of my head. Those two were actually really good to listen to. I really enjoyed them. Gave me the second one, Queen Beeism, gave me a lot to think about. Not necessarily from a workplace standpoint, I haven't had that issue, but just in life, when I think about sometimes how I've felt about certain things, I've never actively done anything like that, but anything to hold anybody else back. But
there have been times, I think I've probably felt, a certain way from a queen beeism standpoint. I felt not necessarily territorial, but almost left behind, if that makes any sense.
Yeah, I think we do. I've done that before too. Just sometimes too, just that the bias thinking that like she said with the gardener, the assumption that the gardener was a man and the cook was a
Yeah,
woman, and so I think we all
yeah,
do it.
yeah.
And it's just to be careful. And it just always, I used to really say it a lot back in when I was younger. I get along better with men because I was working in a male dominated in field, and
Hmm.
the women who I met that were in that field, they were queen bees. So it just made me feel like I don't want to fool with women in this. Mm-mm. But when I think about it overall, I realized that was just felt. That was just emotional thinking. It was just and I think a lot of it was from hurt. And I think a lot of times we suffer a lot of hurt at the hands of other women. And so then we start to project that out as if we don't experience the hurt at the hands of men as well. People, period, in your life will hurt you when you let they have the opportunity to hurt you and when you let them in. And that's not always the case because people who are good, they'll be good and they won't be out trying to do things to you. So it's just really it goes back to trying the spirit. So I definitely have had my own bias,
I
and
do
that's something
agree.
I try to be conscious of it, and that's something I try not to say anymore. Is I get along better with men, because now I just get along with whoever's trying to be righteous for real.
Mm, I do agree. I do agree with you on that.
So thanks for joining me today as I pondered this idea of how do the laws show up in toxic work environments. Because when I'm doing the Working Class Chronicles, and we're building the forge and my as I build out my leadership plan and do the studying, it's interesting. And that's not. And speaking of the studying, I will be posting the syllabus for the classes. You have a list of books. I gave you a list of books and I'm ready to dive in. What about you?
Me too. I am. Yes.
So, post
But I
up.
do
We
need
can.
to know for sure which one's going to be like what the order is going to be.
Well, the order is going to be whatever we decide to order because really, even with some of these, if you look at it, like we're doing the 21 irrefutable laws of leadership. Some of the when we go through those laws, it ends up being a law of power. So that's why it's like there are times you're going to open the law of power, 48 laws of power, and it's going to be relevant because you think about it. We talked about with the law of the lid how a moment of don't shine the outmaster came in. Don't outshine the master came in. But I do think that we should just go ahead and continue with. Did you ever finish the 21 irrefutable laws of leadership?
No. No, I
So
did not.
let's go ahead and dive in full time to that. Do
Okay.
you want and then so do you want to read a chapter at a time or do you want to have a couple of chapters before we come back? Because we don't, we had got all the way to 9, so we don't have to belabor it. We can just get to jumping and then jump into I would say the next one will be either the 33 strategies of war or the 48 laws of power.
Okay.
What do you
That'll
think?
work
So
for me.
okay, so
I
how
definitely
many
want to do
chapters?
several chapters at a time. I don't want to just do one chapter at a time.
Okay. So we'll read the what chapters?
3.
Also, if you read the next 3 chapters, and don't forget, and the audiobooks are available online for people who don't have time and you have to listen. You
Yeah.
are supposed to couple each of those laws with those 21 most powerful minutes in a leader's day.
Yay.
Okay. So I will catch you next time.
Yeah. Bye bye.
Bye. Zell.